Okay, thank you, Jayun, and hello everyone for this webinar on a very important topic of judicial freedom in Asia. And thanks for East Asia Institute and ADRN for taking up this project, which is very critical, especially for the democracy of the Asian region. And as we know, the fundamental aspects of democratic growth relies heavily on how good, how autonomous, and how independent the judiciary is. So in a sense, democratic values can only expand if the judiciary is really active and assertive, and it does a sort of efficient job of defending the constitution and protecting the rights. So we have today three presentations. Originally, this project was aiming to have 5 presentations on 5 very interesting countries in Asia: India, Philippines, Sri Lanka, South Korea, and Myanmar. Unfortunately, Myanmar had to drop out because of the extraordinary situation in that country, and Korea also we couldn't make much progress, although there was a very interesting proposal. So hopefully at some point this study also will come off. But we have 3 country studies at the moment, and all 3 are very present very interesting dimension of judicial growth, autonomy, independence, and where does, and all the 3 in fact stand at a very cross points, I would say, because I think all 3 countries are have a lot of, in fact, if someone asked me to write a sort of comparative way, I find these 3 countries, India, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, at a very interesting crossroads, in which these countries achieved enormous amount of judicial freedom in all your decades, other thing, and then suddenly they have gone through largely because of strongman rule, majoritarianism, and many other things which is sweeping populism. So I think at some point we'll find a sort of ground to compare these 3 countries. So basically, the project which largely aimed at driving 4-5 key questions, which all the coordinator and researchers are well aware, but I just wanted to repeat for the others to have a sort of view. So the main driving questions were, one was to provide a quick overview of the judicial evolution in each country, and how these countries have actually gone through different milestones, different events which has shaped the power and the autonomy of the judiciary in that country. And many of these countries have actually gone through a sort of, they have basically got, or I would say, there is a colonial sort of factor in which colonial system of judiciary and processes have been taken over by this country, which have gone through sort of amendment over a period of time. But I think there's a lot of colonial imprint. And then second aspect we wanted to know is about the constitutional, legal, and administrative provisions, that provides a kind of powers to judiciary, and which way these sort of constitutional protection, whether it's appointment or removal, or security of tenure in terms of their salary and other protection, how that has actually influenced the judiciary's power and performance. And then another question that we also asked researcher to explore is about the judiciary performance over the years, how judiciary in each country has able to respond to different challenges, largely through executive powers, and where does it stand today? And then what are the major challenges they face, as a judiciary, in terms of not only performance and providing accessible and quick justice to the people, but also in terms of performing their constitutional duties and protecting the constitutions and advancing rights and liberties. And then we also asked in the end what could be kind of 4-5 major suggestions to improve, the existing judicial system in each country. So with this, I would invite now. I think first I will invite Attorney Jeti Sandoval, because she's having the bit of uncertainty there in Philippines because of a sudden decision about power cuts and other things. So I think we'll allow her first to finish her presentation, and then next will be Supun Jayawardene, and I'll present in the end. So over to you, Attorney.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone. As Niranjan said, that we have a challenge in the Philippines because it was just announced that there will be rotating brownout. So I don't know if my power will hold, but hopefully it will. For this afternoon, the presentation that I will share with you really just will cover, as Niranjan said, the background of judicial independence in the Philippines, the history as well of the judicial structure or setup in system in the Philippines, as well as the challenges that we are currently facing. We will present you some of the aspects that we have identified, and lastly present also some recommendations that may be considered, again, to improve and ensure that there will be judicial independence. So the outline of the paper, I'm just showing you the outline of the paper. We begin with a story of a poor man wanting to go to court, or have gone actually to court to file a case, and thinking about the future that his case will present in court as he battles the more powerful. Why do we say that the judicial independence matter? Well, people who go to court, litigants who go to court, need to be assured that there is trust and confidence in the judicial system. And to be able to do that, the courts need to show that judicial independence, mainly or primarily through the impartiality of the courts, is present. That the judges will decide without fear or favor, regardless of any obstacles that they face coming from any interests. And when impartiality is assured, then that is one way of ensuring that the people will continue to come to court, and to ensure that the court, on the other hand, will ensure that their rights will be protected, and the trust and confidence to the system will continue. Just to give you a quick background on the Philippine system of government, from the time that the American colonizers left the country in 1946, 1945, and freedom or independence was given to the Philippines, we have the same type of system, which is presidential constitutional democracy, unitary, where we have a chief executive who is both the head of state and the head of government. We have a legislature, which is composed of a upper house and a lower house, and a judiciary, a single judiciary with one Supreme Court, appellate courts, and the trial courts below it. So this shows you the diagram of the current system of government that we had. In the 1987 Constitution, the most current Constitution, the judicial independence is not strictly written in the Constitution. Of course, there is a section on the judiciary, but the judicial independence can be inferred in the decisions of the court, laid down in the concepts, which basically we can look at covering basically two aspects: the decisional independence or the adjudicative independence of the court, and the second one would be its institutional independence, or how the court as a manager, no? And how as a manager it maintains its independence. The court of the Philippines, as I have said, has a single Supreme Court with 15 justices led by a Chief Justice. The lowest tier, or the first tier, would be the trial courts, both the metropolitan as well as the municipal trial courts and the regional trial courts. Then the second one is followed by the appellate courts, the Court of Appeals, the tax appeals, and the Sandigan Bayan, which is provided in the Constitution, which is both a trial court as well as an appellate court for graft cases. Both for private individuals as well as government employees. The other offices which are part of the executive but has quasi-judicial functions can also go up to either the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. As I have said, we just have one solo Supreme Court. In brief, and I will talk about this more in detail later on, the important aspects as we look at in judicial independence covers the caseload of the courts as well as the budget. Now, let me just focus first on the budget and talk about the caseload and the implications of the caseload later on. But in terms of the budget of the judiciary, the whole judiciary, there is a UN rapporteur report that says that the budget of the judiciary, for it to be effective, should be between 2% to 6% of the national budget. Upon looking at the budget of our judiciary, it currently in 2020, the budget is 1% of the total budget. So this is below what is perceived to be the average or standard, no, in terms of budget, to be able to make sure that it effectively functions. In the past, past years, it's even lower than 1%. No? And so that's a thing that I can go back to later on. Let me now let me just go back to the outline of our paper, and I will remain here. My video, my slide will remain here throughout. We present to you in our paper several aspects of judicial independence that is currently present in the Philippines. The first one involves the depolitization of the appointment process for judges and justices. How is this done? In the current constitution, there is a provision that mandates the creation of what is called a Judicial and Bar Council, or the JBC. The JBC is a non-political, non-partisan body, which is composed of 7 people. And the way it is composed is to ensure that there is a mix of multi-sectoral. No? There's a mix of the people coming from the courts. So the ex-officio chair is the Chief Justice. Also coming from the legislative, the chairs of the committees on justice of both houses, the lower house and the upper house, again as ex-officio members, and the regular members composed of the representative of the Integrated Bar, the Association of Lawyers, a retired justice of the Supreme Court, and a representative of the private sector. This is to ensure that there is a mix and that the process of choosing, the mandate of the JBC is to choose the members of the judiciary, that this process of vetting that they will go through is devoid of any political influences, and that there will be a basis of the selection will be based on merit and fitness. So that's the first mechanism that is present to ensure that in the choosing of the people who will sit in the judiciary, you take away the political debt or any owing of loyalty to any person as a basis for being appointed. The second aspect of judicial independence is regarding the administrative supervision of the lower courts. Right now, in the current setup, it is the Supreme Court that manages the lower courts. In the past, Prior to the second constitution in 1973, it used to be the Department of Justice, but it was seen as a diminution because the courts now are beholden to the executive, so that was taken out. And so the current process now is for the Supreme Court to manage the lower court. We now have, and the office is called the Office of the Court Administrator, or OCA. We now have more than 2,000 courts. The management is centralized. So later on, I will explain to you some of the challenges. Now, this is good for judicial independence because it's within the powers of the Supreme Court. However, you can imagine the problems that a centralized management would arise. No, I will talk about this in detail later on. The third aspect of judicial independence is fiscal autonomy. In the current constitution, the current Philippine Constitution, fiscal autonomy is assured. There is a provision that says that the judiciary shall enjoy fiscal autonomy, and that the budget may not be reduced by the legislature. So what should happen is the budget of the current year should not be less than the budget of the past year, that once approved, it will be released automatically and regularly. So those are the features of autonomy, of fiscal autonomy. If a budget is unspent, it will not be reverted back to the National Treasury, and the judiciary can retain the budget until it is spent. So that's the third aspect, no? Fiscal autonomy. The next aspect is security of tenure of the judges and the justices. In the Philippines, a judge can sit in the bench until he or she reaches the age of 70, and you cannot be removed for cause. There is a current mechanism, a board, a judicial integrity board, that sets up the guidelines and the procedures on how a judge can be disciplined. For the justices of the Supreme Court, the Constitution provides that they can only be removed through impeachment. So that's the process of removing. So the justices are also secured in the sense that they can be there, sit until 70, and only be removed by impeachment. So those are the features that are good for judicial independence, and when effective and when working well, then they will contribute, no, to ensuring that that judicial independence is robust in the country. But let me just go to some of the challenges. So let me go back to the JBC. As I mentioned, the JBC is a body that is multisectoral. So it has been in existence for 34 years. And the process is, if you're applying for a position in the judiciary, then you submit your requirements there, and you go through a rigorous vetting. You go through a rigorous interview, submitting all necessary documents. No? So this is supposed to ensure that the committee will now look at the merits and ensure that those who are appointed are based on merits. No? However, we have not seen any study or any evaluation on how effective the JBC has been. It was only also lately that the proceedings are open to the public, so there is the public is not so much aware of how the process goes on. So in the recommendation later on, we will recommend probably after 34 years a review of how the JBC has been contributing to judicial independence, how it can be further improved, although of course it is a constitutional provision, no? And to be able to make sure that the JBC sustains or maintains its mandate. The second one is the court administrator, the one that administers all the courts. As I have said, we have more than 2,000 courts, lower courts in the country, spread all over the country, and it is centralized. So you can imagine the difficulty, all the bureaucratic processes, no, that courts will have to go through to be able to secure simple supplies that they need in the courts, the construction of buildings, repairs, and of course, especially with COVID, the need to adjust to social distancing, technology, etc., etc. No? In the past, in early 2000, there was a project by the ADB that piloted a decentralization of the courts where you regionalize the management. And unfortunately, this was not pursued, no? But it would have been a good exercise to see how, if decentralized or regionalized, the management of or administration of the courts would improve, and the needs of the trial courts, especially in far-flung areas. The Philippines is composed of so many islands, and some of the courts are in far-flung areas, and it's very difficult to get in touch with the central system to make sure that their supplies, salaries, reimbursements of expenses are given on time, and that the staff would not be asked not to shell out their own expenses just to make sure that the court functions, no? Which is happening right now in many circumstances. No? If your light bulb goes out, it's supposed to be the Supreme Court that should supply you with a replacement light bulb, but what can you do? So would you wait for 2-3 months for one light bulb to be delivered to your court? So what happens is now it's the courts now who shell out the money if your aircon goes out, or any of the equipment in the office goes out, where the Supreme Court is supposed to handle, but unfortunately because of the administrative processes, it takes a lot of time before it gets through, and therefore it is left to the judge or to the staff, to be able to make sure that they spend for and using their own money to make sure that again, as I said, the court functions. So those are some of the challenges of having a centralized supervision of the lower courts. It's good that it's the Supreme Court that supervises them, but the central system is the one where the difficulty comes in. On the matter of security of judges, of course, as I have said, no, you are a judge until you are 70 years old. Of course, this does not mean that you can be lax, that you can be unethical or improper, and therefore the challenge is how to make sure that the judge, who is not only an adjudicator but at the same time a manager of the court, is evaluated well. They submit a monthly record of all the cases that have been disposed of, but there is really no information on how this disposal or disposition of the cases goes through the process of ensuring or the appointment of the judge to a higher office, or the evaluation of the judge in terms of how the judge is performing. And so therefore there is a lack of that kind of a thorough or evaluation of how the performance of the judge, not just as an adjudicator, as I said, but as a manager of the office, no, or of the courts, no. In terms of the security of tenure of the judges, I would like to quickly bring to your attention to
just a second. Sorry to intervene. I think you are going a little slower. So
yes.
You have around roughly 5 minutes time left. So I think go a little faster, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Generally, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the challenge to judicial independence on the security of the tenure of the justices, the paper discusses two issues: the impeachment process, which eventually turned into a quo warranto proceedings and resulted to the ouster of the current Chief Justice, no, where in the Supreme Court, in our Constitution, it says that the justice can only be removed through impeachment. However, in this case, the Chief Justice was removed through quo warranto. And the second one is the stringent requirements that the Supreme Court imposed on the issuance of the statement of assets and liabilities, which is supposed to be for public consumption and easily accessible to the public. So those two impinges on the security of tenure of the judges. I will go now to the last few minutes on the recommendations. As I have said, when we look at the JBC, as well as the security of tenure of the judges, we want an evaluation of how they have on the performance, on how they have been doing, and to be able, of course, to help input into the whole judicial process and improve the judicial process. We also want a more thorough look at the well, hopefully the courts will reevaluate its rules on the issuance of the SALN to ensure that the accountability and the openness of the courts to the issuance or to the knowledge of their assets, their liabilities are not kept, or there is no stringent requirements before it is issued. We also recommend a look at the fiscal autonomy and fund utilization of the courts. There are reports of low utilization. Can you imagine, it's a small amount of money and there is low utilization. So there's a need to look at this. There's a need to study the utilization of the courts, and to strengthen, lastly, to strengthen the administrative supervision by going back to the regionalization pilot that was done before, and where it worked, then to do it so that the administration of justice will be properly served, and so that the lower courts will have to will not have to face a difficult process or the bureaucratic process of ensuring that administrative needs needed in the courts are difficult to address. So a regionalization, a decentralization of the supervision is also recommended by the paper. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this is excellent overview of what is happening in Philippines, and it's not fair to capture entire thing in just 20 minutes. So I think you have raised some of the fundamental aspects of judicial system in Philippines, and especially in terms of looking at the financial aspects, the administrative centralization, and security of tenure. Some of those are very significant thing to make judiciary work and deliver its sort of mission and vision goals. So in that sense, I think you have captured some of the main elements, and especially your emphasis on JBC, which is a very interesting innovation that not many democracy have actually such kind of system, multi-sectoral body that appoints judges and oversees a lot of work. So I think Philippines is a very interesting case, and I think we will have opportunity to also listen from the audience and participant and others also about Philippines case. With this, I invite now another interesting case, Sri Lanka, which is also going through, the judiciary is going through a very sort of, I would say, turbulent time, especially with the sort of rise of strongmen and populist nationalist government that what exactly we are facing in India. So I now invite Mr. Supun Jayawardene to present the Sri Lankan case. Thank you.
Thank you, Niranjan. So, right. So, good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, and all the distinguished participants. In my presentation, I would like to take your attention throughout the Sri Lankan case study. In Sri Lanka, in this report actually, which we submitted to EIA a few weeks ago, we analyzed judicial independence through two different narratives. So first, judicial independence understood we understood judicial independence through two different but mutually reinforcing narratives. So firstly, the conventional narrative. So conventionally, judiciary is expected to administered independently from other two branches of the government, namely the executive and the legislature, to ensure that judiciary functioned independently. Judges promotion of appointment of judges are made transparent, and there should be a transparent procedure for the ensure of the proper promotions of judges and non-deductible salaries, etc. But there is a conventional narrative on judicial independence as well. So conventionally, we believe that judiciary should be able to function independently as sole protector of country's human rights and sole mediator between conflicting interests. To achieve that mean, judiciary is expected to function independently from political and other external influences. So based on these narratives, let me describe the key trends and trajectories in Sri Lankan judicial independence. So when it comes to the court structure of Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan court system composed with two-tier courts. Firstly, the courts of first instance and the appellate courts. So appellate courts consist with the Supreme Court, composed with Chief Justice and other 17 judges, and Court of Appeal. Both Supreme Court and Court of Appeal adjudicate all the appellate matters and fundamental rights cases, etc., which serves as appellate courts of all the civil and criminal matters. And in addition, there are Court of First Instance, which consists with High Court, District Court, and the Magistrate Court. So District Court and Magistrate Court are the Court of First Instance, which adjudicate primary jurisdiction over civil and criminal matters. In addition to that, there are administrative tribunals and other tribunals which enjoy quasi-judicial power over certain cases. In Sri Lanka, the framework for judicial independence is provided under the Constitution and the Judicature Act. So in Sri Lanka, there are three institutions I would like to describe here, or I would like to explain here. One is the judiciary. So as I explained earlier, judiciary composed with both appellate courts and courts of first instance. In addition to that, there is a Judicial Service Commission established through the Constitution. Judicial Service Commission composed with Chief Justice and other two Supreme Court judges. And Constitution ensure its independence. So interference, unlawful interference or undue interference into the Judicial Service Commission is a punishable offense under the Constitution. In addition to that, there is a Judges Training Institute. So Judges Training Institute is established in 1985, which serve as the institution which developed career capabilities of judges. So to achieve that means they conduct frequent seminars and training programs to strengthen judges' professional capabilities. In Sri Lanka, both the Constitution and the Judicature Act introduced a number of measures to ensure that Supreme Courts and other courts function independently. When it comes to measures, so appointment process. So appointment of judges are enshrined in Constitution. Thereby, appointment to the superior courts are conducted by His Excellency the President, with the approval of Parliamentary Council. And Judicial Service Commission conduct the appointment to the courts of first instance. In addition, judges are protected with fixed tenure, so they can serve until they reach their mandatory retirement age, or unless otherwise they impeached or removed due to grave or serious judicial misconduct. And judges cannot be removed except through the proper procedure established in the Constitution, and for lower court judges, removal procedure handled by the Judicial Service Commission, and they are provided proper salaries. They are not deductible at all. And transfer of judges for lower courts, usually transferring takes place for lower courts or for the courts of first instance. Judicial Service Commission conduct the transfer process according to their own formula, but formulas and procedures are not publicly available, however. And contempt of court. In Sri Lanka, contempt of court is a punishable offense under the Constitution. And judges are protected from suit, or they are sued, immune from suit for their judicial action. However, although structural independence of the judiciary is provided under the Constitution and other related legal provisions, in Sri Lanka, there are a number of challenges to the judicial independence. So in this report, we have divided these challenges into three. First, the institutional challenges to institutional independence, and challenges to financial independence, and challenges to authority and reputation of the courts. So when it comes to the institutional independence of the judiciary, there are three separate issues which challenge the independence of the judiciary. So discretionary appointments, intransparent promotions, and unproportional unprocedural removals are those three factors mainly challenge the institutional independence of the judiciary. So when it comes to the discretionary appointments from 1978 onwards, when after following the passage of new constitution, executive president hold the discretionary power to make appointments to the superior courts. So as a result, first Chief Justice also selected from among the private bar, but he surprisingly he played very distinguished role as a Chief Justice. However, in 19th and the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, President's appointment power was somewhat limited, but again under the existing 20th Amendment to the Constitution, President regained this discretionary power, but there is a parliamentary council which has the authority to give its observation over the president's appointment, but they cannot challenge president's discretionary power. So when it comes to the historical details relating to the appointment of Supreme Court judges, we can see among 14 Chief Justices appointed under the 1978 Constitution, 3 were directly elevated to the post of Chief Justice from the post of Attorney General, over and above other judges with long judicial experience. And other 4 judges also were the officers of Attorney General's Department, who were appointed to the appellate courts in time to time. And among 14 Chief Justices, only 2 Chief Justices were career judges who started their judicial career from primary courts. So this show the length and breadth of presidential intervention to the appointment process in Sri Lanka. So this discretionary appointment led to intransparency pertaining to the promotion of Supreme Court and other court judges. So when it comes to the court of first instance, Judicial Service Commission conduct all the appointment and promotion of judges. So appointment process usually conduct through an competitive exam and the rigorous interview process, but procedure relating to such exam or interview process is not publicly available. And promotion list is available relating to this lower court judges, but criteria for such performance is not publicly available. So these types of practices and political interventions currently challenge the institutional independence of the Sri Lankan judiciary. In addition to that, I think this distinguished audience know about the impeachment of former Chief Justice Shirani Bandaranaike and how it questioned the procedural propriety of the removal process of Supreme Court judges or judges in Sri Lanka. When I scamper through the impeachment of Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike, the incident that incident, where the Supreme Court Justice Shirani Bandaranaike was headed the two benches which blocked the passage of a new legislation called Divi Naguma Bill. Generally, that bill sought to usurp many provincial council powers and attempted to bring heavily funded government agencies or government programs into one single ministry called Ministry of Economic Development. With these two Supreme Court decisions, which rejected the passage of the bill, there was a huge disagreement between the executive and the judiciary. By the time 117 government ruling party members filed an impeachment motion against former Chief Justice Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike, and Speaker decided to entertain the impeachment motion. And as a result, a Parliament Select Committee was appointed to conduct the investigation. Following that, following the judgment of Parliamentary Select Committee, which decided to impeach Supreme Court former Chief Justice on number of allegations, President Rajapaksa signed and ratified the impeachment motion, and Dr. Shirani Bandaranaike removed from her office. So this raised number of criticism over removal process of judges in Sri Lanka. As a result, in 2018, when Parliament passing new set of standing orders, they have introduced a standing order with clear process or clear procedure to remove Chief Justice, with the which is usually has to conduct through commission or committee of Parliamentary Select Committee of Inquiry, which is represented by former Supreme Court judges. So now the procedure is established, a clear procedure is established to ensure that judges are removed in transparent manner. When it comes to the removal of lower court judges, lower court judges are usually removal process conducted by the Judicial Service Commission, and but procedure or process relating to such removal is not publicly available at the moment. In addition to challenges of institutional and financial independence of the judiciary, institutional independence of the judiciary, there are a number of challenges to its financial independence as well. In Sri Lanka, currently there's no clear proper procedure to ensure that budgets are provided or funds are provided to fulfill the growing needs of the judicial sector. And there's no proper procedure to ensure that judges get adequate salary revisions according to their growing financial needs and growing cost of living. This created huge challenge on financial independence of the judiciary. In addition to that, there are a number of instances where the authority and reputation of the judiciary get challenged. In recent history, President get the opportunity to or constitutional ability to intervene into the judiciary in number of direct and indirect ways. Especially, President can appoint sitting and former Supreme Court judges or Court of Appeal judges to Presidential Commission of Inquiries, which provide them financial benefits and extra additional reputation. In addition to that, according to Sri Lankan Constitution, if Superior Court judges need to involve in profit-making activity, they need to get it approved by the president. So this creates an intrinsic link between executive and the judiciary. In recent history, under the President Maithripala Sirisena, he has appointed number of Supreme Court judges to so-called Bond Commission, which was the President's Commission of Inquiry, appointed to investigate the Treasury bond issue, Treasury bond scandal. And in recently, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa also appointed number of Supreme Court judges for the Presidential Commission of Inquiry to investigate Easter Sunday attack. In addition to that, from 2009 onwards, following the request made by the Fijian government, Sri Lankan presidents appoint Superior Court judges for a shorter time period to serve in Fijian courts. So this gives Superior Court judges the financial benefits and international experience. But unfortunately, procedure or selection criteria for this opportunity or these posts are not publicly available. In addition to that, in 2017, Parliamentary Select Committee on Law, Anti-Corruption and Media revealed that case delay is a huge problem in Sri Lankan justice sector. According to that report, nearly 10.2 years take for the conclusion of criminal case, and further 7 years spent for the appeal process. So all you know, this distinguished audience know that justice delay means justice denied. So this delay of justice create a number of issues. With this delay incorporated or accompanied with the manual case handling process, which become major source of inefficiency in Sri Lankan judicial system. So despite these challenges to judicial independence, let me take you to a recent judgments where our Supreme Court uphold the democracy. In 2018, when President decided to dissolve the parliament, Supreme Court unanimously disapproved President's decision and decided that President's decision to dissolve parliament was unconstitutional. And again, in both 20th Amendment Bill case and the Port City Economic Commission Bill case, Supreme Court decided that number of clauses of said bills are not consistent with the Constitution. Therefore, if Parliament or government need to approve that bill as it is, it has to be approved by people at a referendum.
Just a second. Sorry to say, you have 2 minutes time left, actually.
Okay, so thank you, Niranjan.
Yeah, please continue.
Right. So this shows Sri Lankan Supreme Court enjoy greater independence over the constitutional matters. In addition, recently Supreme Court decided and Supreme Court ordered government to proactively intervene to protect rights of persons with disabilities. And there are a number of instances where judiciary, Sri Lanka Supreme Court step out and expand the canvas of judicial review to guarantee environmental rights of the citizens. When it comes to the protection of minority rights, there in 2019, Supreme Court given a landmark judgment against the culprits of Middlesbrough massacre, where Tamil civilians were massacred by former army personnel, and Supreme Court provided a death penalty against such a culprit. And however, Supreme Court decision to dismiss number of petitions against forced cremation of dead bodies who were victims of COVID-19 pandemic were highly criticized by legal community, because Supreme Court in that case dismiss the petition without even looking into the merit of such petition. So based on these findings, let me take you to our suggestions to improve the judicial independency, or to ensure that judicial function with greater independence. So there, in Sri Lanka, all you know, in 2016, Sri Lankan Parliament passed the Right to Information Act, where all the government institutions required to proactively disclose their information, public information. So Judicial Service Commission also should be encouraged to disclose public about the information relating to appointment, promotion, and removal of judges. In addition, it is better to ensure greater independence of the judiciary, an establishment of public portal which allow public to raise their grievances relating to judicial misconduct. And there are a number of external measures where we suggest to improve judicial independence, especially the Ministry of Justice. There is a growing need for Ministry of Justice to develop a portal to give realistic and up-to-date information about the judicial proceedings. And there's need for clear media guidelines on how to report judicial proceedings in a way which not harm the independence and integrity of judges. In addition, there should be an establishment of commission, independent commission or independent committee on judicial salaries and condition of service to ensure that judges get adequate salary revisions and revision of pension indexes. Apart from the above mentioned core areas of improvement, in order to ensure that speedy case hearings, speedy case disposal, there should be a mechanism to streamline Sri Lankan judicial system with legal technology and to provide judges more human resources and material resources to strengthen their official capabilities. So this, so let me conclude my presentation with this remark. So I would like you all to raise your question and concerns when this Q&A session starts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supun, for this, I would say, very, very comprehensive and cogent presentations in which you have covered the broad swath of development so far in Sri Lanka, and also for illustrating some of the important constitutional amendments and some of the incidents, including Justice Vandra Naik's impeachment, which was a turning point in Sri Lanka's judicial history, and it had a chilling effect on judicial freedom. So I think we'll definitely have opportunity to revisit your presentation, and obviously I think participant would obviously ask probably more they would look more deeper into your presentation. So we'll have opportunity in Q&A. Now it's my turn to present India case. So I'll share my screen. Okay. Okay. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So India case, I'll be largely give a sort of quick snapshot because it is such a, I would say in terms of judicial power, it's such a complex case study that in 1 hour presentation won't actually give you a sort of a comprehensive overview. So, but I'll try as much I can at least throw some of the important journeys, and so far where India's judicial system stands today. Because especially for last 6-7 years, India, which is witnessing a sort of populist, nationalistic churn in its democratic journey, is judicial power is going through unbelievable crisis. So I would capture some of those, especially last 7 years, more in greater detail than going deeper into the judicial history and its journey. So just to give a sort of quick overview, Indian judicial system after we got independence in 1947. So 1950 we established a full judicial system, which is a kind of mix of American, British, and Canadian system. But we inherited a lot of British colonial legacies, especially like we followed the British common law system, but we also added the statutory law and regulatory law too. So in a sense, India has followed a kind of mix of best practices all around the world. And in Indian judiciary, I want to reiterate this, that is one of the most powerful democratic institution in the world. Why I'm saying that Indian judiciary is most powerful democratic institutions, for the single most reason is that it is probably among the large democracies, it is only judiciary which appoints itself. That higher judiciary has a system of collegium system in which 5 judges, senior judges, they appoint the judges of Supreme Court and the high courts. So this is very unique system, and that gives judiciary kind of autonomy and immunity from the executive interference. And second is also because Indian judiciary has expansive interpretative power, in which it can actually take cases suo motu and interpret fundamental rights in an expansive way. And in that sense, judiciary has a lot of law-making power. Okay, now the structure and composition, in India is a deeply federal country, but unlike US and many other federal system, we follow a single integrated system, a unitary kind of justice system, in which Supreme Court is the highest court of the land, and then we have High Court, District Court, and tribunals. But all of them actually in many ways controlled by the Supreme Court. So while we are a federal country, but in terms of justice delivery system, we have a unitary system. So it's like the case of like Philippines. It's a kind of integrated system. Judicial autonomy and independence. How this is actually assured, and what are the mechanisms in place, like what we saw in the case of Philippines and Sri Lanka. There are elaborate mechanisms in India to ensure the judiciary is autonomous and enjoys a fair degree of independence, and that is assured largely by standard best practices all around the world you see. One is by laying down rigid qualification for the appointment of judges. So judges who have to qualify for starting from the lower to higher and the Supreme Court have to have strict qualification and experience. So and there is no compromise. And then another significant thing which ensures the autonomy and independence is that while for initial 50 years we had a system in which judges were largely appointed by the executive. But this was the judges themselves changed this system because there were many cases of executive interference and politicization, what we have seen in case of Philippines and other places. So to avoid that, Indian Supreme Court judges took this power onto themselves, and this is where actually the immunity is guaranteed. And then we have, of course, in place the system of security of tenure for the judges. Once they are appointed, they cannot be easily impeached. Impeachment in India is impossible to attend. So far, we have just 3 or 4 judges in last 74 years. So that shows why Indian judges enjoys a fair degree of independence. And then salary pensions of judges are actually accrued from the consolidated fund, which is separated from the budget. So they have a specific fund available, which is controlled by the parliament only, and that cannot be compromised at any point. So that also allows them fair degree of financial autonomy. And then condition of service rules, for judges cannot be changed after retirement, because there will be always political vendetta and other things. But that cannot be changed once they retire. So that will remain what the service rules were when they were in the job. So the the fountainhead of entire judicial system is the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is the highest court of appeal. It is apex body that whatever laws, judgment it takes, it's binding for all institutions in the country. It is also the appellate court which takes cases from the high courts and decides over largely on the issues of human rights. And Chief Justice of India is the highest authority appointed by the President of India. But other 30 judges are appointed by a collegium system, as I said, Chief Justice with 4 senior judges. So basically, in terms of also composition of Supreme Court, India has been following a very sort of trying to balance, through regional representation, through ethnic representation. So I think people from all segments find their place in the Supreme Court. So there is always a kind of balance of population as well as ethnicity. And power and jurisdiction of the Indian judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, is decided on 4 jurisdiction. One is original jurisdiction, as you have seen from the other cases, that it is Supreme Court which adjudicates any disputes between the union and the states or the provincial governments. So that is where actually the Supreme Court comes into place. Also, it also plays a major role in habeas corpus mandamus, especially defending the fundamental rights and protecting those rights. Then it also acts as an appellate court. As I said about the higher court judgments are heard by the Supreme Court. And advisory jurisdiction, it advises the President of India time to time on any major disputes with regard to the interpretation of the constitutions. And miscellaneous power, it has wide-ranging miscellaneous power, including the judicial review. That if there is a law enacted by the Parliament, which if in case creates a dispute or in any manner actually goes against the constitutional principles, the Supreme Court has the power to call that law null and void. This is the main story about, I'll take a quick snapshot about how judicial power has grown in India in the last 74 years and where does it stand today. You can easily, in a couple of slides, you can easily see how the judiciary in India started in the very fast phase, starting with 1950s, when the country became, a sort of republic and started establishing independent constitutions after it owned the freedom. The judiciary largely acted as a sort of impartial body, and it tried to adhere to the constitutional principles. So initial decade and half, judiciary largely tried to prevent the executive wherever it tried to usurp the constitutional power. For instance, in certain cases, the government of the day wanted to abolish Land Rights Act or right to property, because it was a socialist government and it wanted to allow a lot of land reforms. So right to property came to question. So in that sense, the Supreme Court and the judiciary stood by the constitutional principles which guaranteed right to property. So it nullified. But however, the Parliament actually enacted and abrogated that right. Similar also, it did same thing also with right to equality, when affirmative action was brought in to benefit certain segment of the population who are marginalized. So that also was nullified by the Supreme Court, saying that this goes against the right to equality. But again, Parliament prevailed and it brought constitutional amendment. So there was a kind of tug of war between the Supreme Court and the Parliament, but it actually happened within the jurisdiction of the Constitution. So no institutions really overstepped. So there was a healthy competition between executive and judiciary in the first 15 years of the India's independence. Now, second phase is where actually the real problem started, and that actually happened largely because in the early late 60s, we witnessed a government which was actually seen very sort of majoritarian government, and it was led by Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and she was of an authoritarian, kind of sort of a leader, and she wanted to bring sweeping reforms on many aspects of the republic, and like nationalize banking system, and several kind of abolition of landed that jamidari system and many things. So this is where the judiciary tried to stop the government, and the famous case was in the late 60s was the Goloknath case, in which the Supreme Court declared many of the government's initiative as illegal because they attacked the constitutional principles. But then the government brought the amendments, and through parliamentary majority tried to run a roughshod. But important case again, the Supreme Court again challenged the parliament and the executive largely in a significant case called Kesavanand Bharati case in the 1972. In which the Supreme Court defined that Parliament cannot actually just do any amendment it likes. It has to, while doing that, it has to follow something called basic structure of the constitutions, which means that there are fundamental elements in the constitution that cannot be violated. So by doing that, judiciary expanded its power in a massive scale. But then again, this led to a major face-off between the executive led by the Mrs. Indira Gandhi and then the judiciary. And that led to the parliament passing several legislation, and it's also tried to politicize the judiciary. In fact, the appointment of judges, that time the executive used to appoint the judges. So many judges were actually packed who were basically the pro-government, kind of persons. So that led to, something called executive judiciary in the early 70s. And this also led to fundamental erosion of, liberty or personal freedom, and we experienced a kind of emergency declaration in the 1975 with Mrs. Gandhi, in which the judiciary was forced to basically support right to life taken away by the executive, and that was one of the darkest chapter in our judicial history. So we have seen actually from the best to worst kind of judicial intervention. Then the third phase, which happened in the especially after 1977, when emergency was finally over, and a new government came largely after the massive defeat of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, because her usurpation of power and taking power, almost all the powers to her hand, and the way she treated the judiciary, that actually led to major backlash. And ultimately, her government was defeated. And then a new coalition government came in 1977 called Janta government. And it actually brought the judiciary back to the table. And then judiciary took advantage of, that moment, and it tried to reassert itself. And that moment came in a very, very important judgment called Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, 1992, in which the judiciary expanded the interpretative power in terms of linking right to life with right to have unrestricted kind of any kind of restriction on somebody's freedom, whether it's freedom of speech or right to life linked to right to healthy environment. So many ways it expanded. And this was also time when, especially in the 80s, early 80s and late 90s, this was a period when the judiciary also used very innovative tools, especially borrowed the tools of public interest litigation, those who are familiar, from the United States, which were witnessing kind of a sort of judicial revolution in many areas. And public interest litigation, in which a third person can take up the causes of like environmental pollution, or rights of the minorities, or rights of the workers or laborer who cannot defend themselves. So this actually led to judiciary use this tool to expand and create many new rights. And in the 80s and 90s, India witnessed a sort of judicial revolution in many spheres, because executive couldn't actually provide or defend the rights of many segment of the population. It was judiciary which stepped in and tried to provide all kind of support to the marginalized population, to the disadvantaged population, to women, to those, religious minorities and severally. So that was a period when judiciary became almost a talk of the town in many places, actually, Indian judiciary. And it was also during this particular period when the executive, especially the executive, was weak, and we had several coalition government in the 90s and early 2000s. So judiciary also took advantage of this and tried to take the power of appointment from the executive to itself. This is, of course, a dispute which is widely debated in India, and a lot of people say that this is wrong because you can't appoint yourself. But by doing this, judiciary has ensured that its appointment power and appointment, in many cases, what we witnessed in the earlier decade, especially with Indira Gandhi's period, that she appointed a lot of her supporters as judges, has been has ended. And today we at least witness that judiciary is in full control in terms of the major appointments. This is about the current phase, fourth phase, which is we are going through a reversal, actually. What earlier 2 decades we witnessed till 2014, we witnessed a judicial kind of supremacy and judiciary asserting on many domains. Since 2014, especially return of the Bharatiya Janata Party under Narendra Modi, his government, which after almost 30 years owned the political majority in the parliament, is now trying to almost control the judiciary in a major way, in terms of interfering in the appointment process, in terms of interfering in the transfer and promotion process. So in several ways, it is trying to micromanage. And the judiciary today is actually working under pressure, which, asserted in the earlier decades, has taken several crucial judgments in the recent times, which is basically supporting the governments. In terms of even sedition law, government is able to arrest, people who are opposed to it, on fictitious sort of cases. They are also, a lot of them are not finding any kind of, judicial remedy, and judiciary is finding some pretext or other to delay. But most of the fundamental aspects is the Supreme Court is failing in defending the Constitution. It is failing as a constitutional court, especially with regard to last year we had a major decisions on Article 370, which guaranteed autonomy to Kashmir. That has been abrogated by the executive, by the parliament, and the judiciary has remained a mute spectator. We have also thousands of habeas corpus cases in which activists, democracy defenders, or opposition leaders are arrested and detained, endlessly, and they are not finding bails. Those cases, even judiciary is looking other way. And the most important is the citizens' law, which was passed last year, which created a lot of controversy because it was seen as discriminatory to especially the Muslim minority. This has also led to a lot of doubts by many that judiciary is not really acting the way it should be. So in a sense, judiciary is not actually becoming a kind of a check on counter-majoritarianism, and it is failing as a counter-majoritarian court, and this is where actually the large concern is today. And we have seen hundreds of cases of mob lynching, and minorities are being routinely attacked, and rule of law is collapsing in many parts, and the judiciary, especially the higher judiciaries, are actually in many ways acting as mute spectators. So these are actually some of the serious concerns. Although in many cases, judiciary are defending and doing justice to many segments of the population, but in many major issues, judiciary is seen as almost a mute spectator. Now, I will take another 2-3 minutes just to note down some of the major challenges. As I said in my last slide, in fact, executive judiciary is a major challenge. The way judiciary has turned to become more like a sort of associate of the executive branch, rather than becoming a check on executive excesses. So that's a major challenge. But there are other fundamental challenges we face in our judicial system, which is about the pendency of the cases. This is, of course, happens in most of the judiciary all over the world. But in India, it is actually massive. We have 35 million cases pending at all levels of judiciary. And if you just go by a McKinsey report recently said, it will take 300 years for India to, at this rate especially, to dispose all the cases. So we are looking at a sort of major, and this immediately major concern about this, sort of pendency is that some of the civil cases, civil disputes takes 30 years, 40 years. So by the time, a person is almost dead actually. So this is actually, betrays the, the justice system in many ways, and it raises doubt about its, relevance and legitimacy. But another issue related to the first one, pendency, is the staggering vacancies. We have vacancies almost at all level, and you just look at high courts. Of 25 high courts in India, we have 410 vacancies out of 1,079 posts. So you can easily see 30 to 40% vacancies are unfilled for years actually. And lower court, it is even worse actually. 40 to 50% vacancies at the lower courts, and lower courts is where actually most of the cases are stuck actually. And then we have almost 7 or 8 chief justice positions are vacant in high courts. With that also we have a problem about inadequate judicial infrastructure, the slow adaptation of technology. It's an irony that we are the one of the superpower in technology, but we are very slow in terms of e-courts, e-filing of cases, online portals, or even video conferencing. 40% of our jails are actually do not have video conferencing facilities. And then the major challenges, of course, with related to judicial branch is about the corruption, favoritism, and 77% of Indian believe, as per Transparency International, that the judiciary is highly corrupt. And then we have also growing instances in the last 7-8 years about post-retirement appointments. A lot of judges who are retiring are given, plum post, and this actually raises about doubt about executive judiciary nexus, which is bad for any kind of constitutional scheme. And then of course access of justice, which is actually a dream actually for most of the population, and this is where I think a lot of efforts are being placed. And the final slide is about how India is trying to address. India has over the years taken a number of steps in terms of setting up commission and committees to suggest remedial measures, and we have a second administrative reform commission which took very detailed study on judicial process and to suggest course corrections. So those are actually being implemented, but at a very snail pace. And then Supreme Court has taken on its own about the national court management, about technology, about bringing some kind of speeding up the process, and how this entire computerization process of the judicial administration can happen. But even then, while the Supreme Court has taken this job onto itself, this process has been not very, very happy so far. It is still very, very slow. And finally, I would say, especially the justice system is now showing some resilience, especially during the COVID period, by taking several good judgments in which to protect the migrant laborer, to protect people who are asking for support, and their civil liberties are violated by the state excesses using all the pandemic and emergency laws. So I think the judiciary is finally now waking up and taking note of kind of violation, widespread violation by the executive. But still, I would say the kind of damage that has happened to the judiciary in the last 7 years will take long time to actually undo. So this is where India stands today. Thank you. I'll request Attorney Sandoval and Supun to also spare maybe 2 minutes each to add on if they have they want to come at this stage and emphasize any part of their presentation they probably couldn't. They have opportunities. I think each one of you can spend maybe 2 minutes each to reflect if any issues that you have left out. So Attorney, your turn first.
Thank you very much. Well, just to say that vigilance should be continued. We need to, as citizens, make sure that our judicial system, the processes, continue to be independent. And if there are any decisions, as in the Philippines, we have lately and mentioned in the paper, actions of the judiciary that would tend to impede this independence. What we need to do is to continue to raise this and ensure that the courts step back and go back to being an impartial court. Thank you very much.
Yes, Supun, you have anything to add on?
I think with the growing corona pandemic situation, it was questioned how the courts should operate independently, because now there are some barriers to public hearings, and court actual due process is got challenged, and there's need for more technological intervention. So there are problems that which software will help courts to operate more efficiently, and there's a huge concern about the privacy of litigants and judges as well. So I think this open new narrative about judicial independence, and but for especially for third world countries and countries in Asia, if we use this as an opportunity, I think it will help all three jurisdictions to um, speed up its case disposal, especially with more technical intervention. Actually, public discussion is much needed. So public also should know about the importance of judicial independence and their role as a responsible citizen in a democracy to uphold judicial independence. So with all these three pillars, I think judicial independence in given jurisdiction will be improved.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's a very pertinent suggestions. Especially, I think in our case studies, I think we should try and attempt maybe a short section looking at how the judicial system is coping up during the pandemic. Because this pandemic has come as a huge challenge, especially if I actually look at my own country. It is judicial system is really struggling. Only the Supreme Court and high courts are able to perform, some degree of their functions through online, sort of a video conference and mode, and, by putting through either through Zoom and, through other mode. But the lower courts, which are do not have that kind of infrastructure, especially the IT infrastructures are, lacking in many way. In many way, are not able to dispense, basic justice or judicial, system is cracking actually in many. Yeah, because just imagine the caseload we have. We have 35 million case loads, and some of the cases are very urgent cases. In many cases, people are put behind the bar for, even without any violation or anything, or politically motivated, and they're not getting bails for almost last 1 year because most of the courts are actually shut. So in a sense, how court judicial systems are in some way or other in these three countries are innovating, and I found, especially our higher courts are innovating in many ways to overcome this by using as much possible, especially the IT infrastructure. And they're in session even during the especially during the holiday also they are in session. So in some way, I think those insights probably can be added to our paper, because this COVID thing can in fact be entirely a different paper altogether if one looks at how judiciary is actually functioning during COVID, like many other democratic institutions like parliament or other bodies. So I think a small section should actually enlighten us and would be helpful in some way. With this, I think I just before I sum up, I wanted to also listen from Attorney Sandoval about the development in your country. Like a couple of days back, one of your human rights lawyer who was actually imprisoned has been, in a major judgment, has been released. So would you like to reflect, because that's quite a very interesting judgment, and it's also in one way the highest court is asserting.
Well, we're very happy, of course, when when our courts perform as where people can see and where people can put their trust and confidence in it. No? But you know, as I said, having said all of the challenges that the judiciary is facing right now, you know, people need, well, of course, people need to know the situation within the judiciary. So this kind of information that we're doing is very important. People need to understand the judiciary is a branch of government where, you know, not a lot of people are really too keen to understand because it's highly technical, it's procedural, etc., etc. So it's important for us to be able to explain to our people what's happening, and to be able for the courts to know that there are people who are vigilant, for people for them to know that they are watching, and that we are putting up front the concerns that we see insofar as ensuring judicial independence is concerned.
Thank you. And with this, I will try to say a few words before we close this. This has been very sort of interesting session, and in which we looked at, you know, three different case studies, but in many ways, Philippines, Sri Lanka, and India, they share similar concerns as far as the judiciary and judicial autonomy and independence, you know, is concerned. In a sense that all three countries, as I said in the beginning, have issues of, you know, strongman rule, populist ruler, and, you know, and a kind of strong executive. So when you have a political sort of churn, which in many way is seen as kind of, you know, majoritarian or plebiscitary in nature. So judiciary will come under heavy sort of pressure, and this is the time also. It also tests the judicial autonomy and independence in many ways, because as I said in my own country case study, when we had series of coalition government and weak executive governments, so we saw that judiciary asserting and, you know, taking a lot of power to itself, which ultimately that led to, you know, when the executive regained the momentum and became stronger, they tried to take over some of those powers. So it's this sort of institutional tussle or competitions is a sort of ongoing process, and in every democracy this will go on. And no democracy is actually probably, except for those handful of Western, I would say the European democracies, most of other democracy will go through this process. So we see that trends here in Asia. And then second aspect is that, you know, there is also ongoing effort from the judiciary and from the you know, other civil society process also to strengthen this judiciary and to make it as much autonomous, as much independent possible, but within the broad framework of the Constitution. So that's still an ongoing process. But the third and the most concerning, I think, the real challenge is about the justice delivery. Forget about the political classes we see, you know, occasionally, or, you know, some of the other thing that happens. But what's happening to the lower judiciary or the mid-level judiciary? You know, the cases, you have millions of cases in many countries are piling up, and justice system is slow. In many cases, you people do not have the trust because they simply cannot fight for, you know, years actually. So slow justice process is expensive, and in many cases untransparent, because in judiciary also we have seen, as in case of India, that many judges actually are, you know, they don't really follow the kind of, you know, constitutional norms or principles laid down by the constitution and administrative system. So in many cases they take law into their hands. So those sort of things are also very commonly observed. So judicial independence, autonomy is one thing, but judicial legitimacy and judiciary, you know, in terms of its performance, is a big question mark in our regions. And this is where I think we should, you know, we have brought out these, you know, issues in our papers. I think we probably need to see that, you know, how many of those things are also, they connect with larger Asia. And this is where I think we should probably, when the paper series comes out, I think we should also have a narrative to see whether these are actually commonly observed trends in Asia, and whether also one can learn from other countries' experience, and those things should actually go into this exercise. With this, I would like to thank Attorney for taking your time and presenting this paper, which is very, very well drafted. I mean, when I read the Philippines paper and the way you have contextualized, you know, starting with the land rights and, you know, and how that narrative I really liked. And in case of Sri Lanka, I think one of the clearest, very, very well articulated paper. It is, I mean, so clearly laid out. I mean, it's like kind of a, I would say, model, a sort of a draft for anyone to follow, actually. I mean, how to write a nice draft, actually. So I enjoyed both the papers and read, and we'll still actually continue to improve it further and before it's published. So I thank you both taking your time and, you know, presenting this paper, and thankful to the electricity department that we didn't have power cut in Philippines. We also face power cuts very often in India as well. You know, sometimes my presentation webinar just goes off actually for 5 minutes before you. So it's always, that's the reason why we insist that, you know, better have a PPT for, especially for webinar, because when we are presenting physically, you are there actually to speak. So and then thanks Julian, East Asia Institute and ADRN for all the efforts and leading this entire process and supporting this webinar and helping us at every stage. We are grateful to you, and with this I would like to end and this webinar, and thank you everyone.